Good morning, everybody. I'm Terry Gerton. I'm the president of the National Academy of Public Administration, and I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar focused on practical projects to improve local government planning and engagement. This marks the kickoff of a collaboration between the Academy and Funkhouser and Associates to bring our combined expertise in strategic planning and local government operations to communities across the country. The last few years have really been extremely challenging, and local governments have had an opportunity to take a fresh look at their strategies to identify new and bold but achievable ideas that can have the biggest impact on their residents' lives. And yet we know many local governments are facing staffing shortages and other capacity gaps that make it difficult to develop long-term approaches and solutions. So today's discussion will introduce you to two communities who found a way to tackle these issues. But before we jump in, I want to introduce Mark Funkhouser, a fellow of the National Academy of Public Administration and the president of Funkhouser and Associates. Mark?
Thank you, Terry. We are really excited to bring our unique brand of strategic planning, where we have a focus on building fiscal capacity and building, activating community relationships, bringing the strength and power and reach of the National Academy of Public Administration to partner with us on this is something that is an incredible opportunity for us and for the communities that we hope to work with. Thank you. Happy to be here today.
All right, we'll turn it over to Dr. Joe Mitchell, the Academy's Director of Strategic Initiatives, to proceed with today's discussion. Joe, over to you.
Great, thank you so much. We welcome everybody here, welcome our speakers, and thank you so much for being here. We know we'll have an engaging conversation. Before we have our speakers come up and have our conversation, we wanted to get a sense from the people who are on the line about your organization's experiences with strategic planning. So James, I think you're going to put up a poll that everybody can answer. Just answer the first question for now. I think there are 3 questions there, but we'll sprinkle these other questions in as we move forward. But first, it's just, what was your experience like in terms of the last year? Was your organization's last strategic planning effort a positive experience or not? And we'll see what people have to say. And James, you can tell us when the results come in.
All right, Joe, looks like we have quorum on that.
Okay, what were the results? All right, so the first one, at least, most people were not happy with your strategic planning experience. So that's 60% of the people who responded were not. And then a lot of people went on and answered the other questions. So you disagree that people got all of your employees involved, and you disagree that you had meaningful community engagement. So that is really good for us to know kind of where people are at this point. So we wanted to talk to you about good strategic planning, and hopefully you would have positive experiences with the kind of processes that we are going to be putting into place. So Sharon and Stacy, I wanted to start with you all, our panel speakers today. And first, Sharon, I'll ask you if you would just introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about your current position and career background before we get into our conversation today.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm Sharon McBride. I am the current president of the South Bend Common Council and 3rd District Representative in South Bend, Indiana. Also, I am the Executive Director for St. Joseph County Community Corrections and have been doing so for 13 years.
Wonderful. Well, we're really excited to have you here, Sharon, and thank you so much for everything that you're doing in public service. Stacy, if you'll just tell us a little bit about your current position and career background.
Thank you, Joe, and good morning, everyone. I am Stacy Rogers, and I have the honor of serving as the County Administrative Officer for Baltimore County, Maryland. Baltimore County has 850,000 residents, and our county government came together about 4 years ago to develop the first ever countywide strategic plan. And we use the strategic plan throughout our work. It's not just a document that sits on the shelf. Recently, we engaged with NAPA to update our strategic plan for our second term, and are very excited about all of the work that we're doing with NAPA that we'll talk about. I have been in this role since 2019, and I am also a very, very proud NAPA fellow.
Great one, Stacey. We're super happy to have you as a fellow. Thank you for everything. And thank you both for your public service and your commitment to strategic planning and community engagement. So Sharon, I'd like to ask you first, like, what are the major challenges in your community in South Bend, and why do you see strategic planning and community engagement as important to addressing those?
Well, first, I would like to say that, fortunately for South Bend, we did have a positive experience with our strategic planning, and it was very inclusive. Of course, throughout the nation, we've seen a rise in gun violence, and I'd say that right now that is the #1 challenge that we are facing here in South Bend, and especially now with our youth. And we have had some new gun laws that were passed that are making it easier for people to have permitless carry and open carry laws without background checks. And now they're putting the clips and altering the guns. So not knowing where they're coming from and who's carrying has been a struggle, especially for our youth. There's a lot of incidents that has happened in our schools as well. So that's the #1 problem that we're having. Another challenge is our housing stock for affordable housing, and in our Black and Brown communities having equitable neighborhoods. There's disparities and inequalities throughout the city. We have done a great job and have made great strides, but we have a long way to go to make sure that everyone is thriving equitably throughout the entire city. And lastly, I would say transparency and inclusion for the residents to feel that they can trust not just only the police department, but local government as well, and to make sure that we are, as council, delivering on our services and making sure that fiscally we are addressing neighborhoods. And unfortunately, we've just had another school closing for our high schools. And with schools failing and closing, that impacts neighborhoods as well. So I'd say those are our top 3 challenges that we've faced throughout this year.
Okay, those are major challenges. A lot of those are consistent with the grand challenges in public administration that we put out a number of years ago and are working on. Stacey, what about you? What are the major challenges that Baltimore County is facing, and are those some similar challenges to those in South Bend?
Thank you, Joe. And yes, I would agree with Sharon. I think in many communities across the country, crime in general, but gun violence is a big issue for our county and our region. But I think the other major challenge for us with respect to serving the community definitely has to do with our housing stock, affordable, accessible housing, and that is indeed one of our primary goal areas for our second term. I think one of the other pieces for us is employment in terms of the workforce, developing the workforce to meet the needs of the jobs and the emerging job markets where the market is trending, and ensuring that we have a viable workforce, as many jurisdictions are experiencing difficulty hiring staff. During the pandemic, when we were in a virtual format, we went from everyone going home then to folks coming back into the workforce. That's difficult. And with the continued exodus of the boomer generation, a viable workforce is the other key area that we're working on in the second term, but we too have a myriad of challenges meeting the needs of the community: solid waste, drinking water, ensuring that our water system is viable and secure. We manage in conjunction with Baltimore City, our sister jurisdiction just south of us.
Well, so lots of challenges that your jurisdictions are facing, and that I think are very common across the country. So wanted to talk, Sharon, maybe go back to you in terms of, we've talked about the challenges, but why do you see strategic planning and community engagement important to addressing those? And then in particular, how did South Bend and Funkhouser and Associates work together with your strategic planning and community engagement?
Well, those are good questions. And I think this is probably the best strategic plan that I've probably seen throughout my career. And what I mean by that, it was very intentional and deliberate and strategic with Funkhouser and Associates coming in. And they made sure that they touched every point of the city. And what we did uniquely, we have 9 council representatives, 6 specific districts, and 3 at large. And each council, we have various neighborhood associations within those districts. And they worked with each association, and each council took a lead of scheduling those meetings, and they were open to the public. They also met with all of the different department heads, and they met with community stakeholders like La Casa. They met with Black Lives Matter, faith leaders. They made sure that they were welcoming and inclusive and transparent with all of the challenges, and had open dialogue of what our strengths are, what are our opportunities for growth, and what are our visions for the future. So I have never seen anything like it, to make sure that we have everyone's voice heard, to make sure that we are listening, and that they would give a raw data and a blunt report as to what it looks like and what people are calling for. And now it's the council's task to make sure that we're fiscally responsible for making sure that we prioritize those recommendations and put them into play, and see how do we start the implementation process? How do we increase our transparency hubs? How do we make sure that the residents have access and the resources that they need, that it should be easy for them to make sure that they know where they go for different departments to pay bills, and about their curbs and sidewalks. People have different needs, and we need to make sure that we're covering. We have food deserts. Unfortunately, we just had Walmart who left out of one of the regions, which is creating a problem for a whole side of a town. So what they did was make sure that they came in and talked to department heads, made sure that they were giving them information that they need, made sure that the council could engage with all of the residents, and not just a specific or a small group, but gave everyone an opportunity to speak and for their voices to be heard.
Great. Yeah, that transparency and inclusiveness is so critical. And as you say, like some of the things dealing with food deserts and so forth, this is really impacting people's lives on a daily basis. So glad that you were able to get all of that input. Stacey, I'd love to ask a similar question to you, but around Baltimore County, in terms of how Baltimore County and the Academy work together.
Sure. Well, our experience going into the strategic planning refresh, if you will, is where we came together with the Academy. We developed a strategic plan back in 2019 during the start of the first term. Our terms are 4 years, our county executive and my appointment are 4-year terms. And what we needed to do was assess what we had accomplished during the first term, what else we needed to do with respect to the priority areas that we had. And I'm really pleased in the work that we did, what we were able to accomplish. There was one area that we did not make as much progress as we would have liked, but we feel that we needed to continue to try. And that was around our educational outcomes and lifelong learning. And so the Academy came in to help us assess where we had been, and then where we as an enterprise needed to go, given the lessons learned from the pandemic, what our workforce and our community members say to us. We have a very robust community engagement around our budget development process each year, where we engage the community, talk to them about the priorities and the projects, and then hear from them in terms of what they believe they need in terms of the budget. And we take that information and it does influence our budget. But the beauty of working with NAPA as our facilitators, we convened our one-day engagement with staff from executive leadership, mid-managers, data analysts, and budget analysts to come together to look at how far we've come, where we were, and where did we believe we should focus and go forward in the next 4 years. By 2026, December 2026, what do we believe that we're going to be able to achieve together given our goals? And as I mentioned earlier, we integrated the new priority areas with workforce development, affordable housing, and then continuing to work on our educational attainment, the goal that we had originally set. NAPA had a way of engaging our leadership. We had 100 people in the room, and big groups like that, sometimes you don't feel like you're going to get out of it, what you need. But having NAPA colleagues facilitate our breakout sessions, they could ask the hard questions that sometimes it's hard internally to ask those questions because people aren't going to be as forthcoming because you're the leadership. But the NAPA team really got that great dialogue going in our breakout sessions. And I'm pleased that the input from that session, that day-long session, we're now using to synthesize and develop our updated enterprise-wide strategic plan. And it's just amazing, because when we started, people were a little lukewarm, like, here we go again with this strategic planning stuff. But by the end, we did a word cloud. We asked everybody to type in what they were thinking. And I think we all were amazed at how positive the words were. I mean, it was amazing. So we've used that word cloud as like a visual imagery of what we believe about where we as a group of individuals working toward a set of common goals over the next 4 years will achieve. And we're going to put that word cloud picture in the document.
It was so great working with you all and the positive energy. And I was a little concerned. We asked people, hey, how do you feel now? At the end of the day, they can say anything they want, it can, anonymous, and it was all very positive. So it was really, I was very, very happy with that. And all of the great ideas that people had, it's just really amazing. So before I continue with Stacey and Sharon, I did want to let you all know, you as the audience, that you have the opportunity to ask questions. Please put questions in the chat. We will get through those as we move forward here. And so I guess the other question I would have of the audience, I know that there were people who responded that you had a negative experience. If people could put in the chat, like, what was it about the experience that was negative? What was the problem with your strategic planning? So it'd be great to hear and be able to kind of get a dialogue with the audience going. So if you, one, want to put in what your experience was like, and why you had a negative experience, or if you had a positive one, what it was about it that was positive. And then two, any questions you have for either Stacy or Sharon, or for the Academy and Funkhouser and Associates would be great. So we'll be watching the chat. And in the meantime, Stacy, I guess just continuing, I know you were starting to talk about the results and what we're going to be doing next with the strategic planning process. And so I was just wondering if you wanted to add a little bit more about that, about, you know, the results of the process and what you're doing now.
Sure. Thank you, Joe. What we're doing now is developing in coordination with the Academy, our straw man of what are the things that we are going to, getting down to the activity levels. What are the activities that we're going to incorporate that support our goals? We did not change our 6 goals, but what we did, we nestled in the breakout sessions, the morning sessions. We talked about what have we done and what did we think we accomplished. And the other critical question was, if we didn't accomplish it, what were the barriers and what do we need to do differently to achieve our goals? And I think that was very important for me as a county administrative officer, because my job is to help our teams be successful. And is that staffing? Is that funding? Is that some kind of internal integrated work across departments to make all of this happen? Because we're also following a outcome-based budgeting model where we actually have our goals embedded in our annual budget. And we reflect each year the actions and activities that are associated with the strategic plan. What we are proposing to our council, Sharon, the funding or the staffing that we believe we need to undertake these activities or efforts, but they all have to line up with the strategic plan. When the departments come forward, they share with us not only what it is they would like to do, what is the desired outcome toward achieving our strategic plan goals. You have to, align it so we're all working together based on things. At the end of the day, when the term is over and we're ready to turn out the lights, we can look back to say, here's what we said we were going to do, here's what we did, and here's the impact, here's the outcome, not output, but outcome. Who or what is better off? And the Academy is helping us to get that straw man for the second term. We just began our second term in December. And so we are putting together those actions. And the very important part that I asked the Academy team to help us with is, what are the measures that will help us see that we were successful? See, to me, this is important that we, the government knows, but the community, our residents that we serve, have tangible evidence of what we've done, what is better. And we place those outcomes, or what we feel will be the end result, in the plan. And so the Academy is helping us to determine what are the best measures, because sometimes you're so close to the work you can't see it. But our Academy colleagues are giving us that wise insight, and it's incredible. It's a wonderful experience working together with the Academy colleagues who each took an area of the strategic plan based on their discipline and are working with us. And my team just love having, when's our next meeting with the Academy? They love it. The feedback from our staff, the team responsible for the strategic planning, development, and management, they are just having a wonderful experience with the Academy because many of them were not familiar with the Academy.
Yeah, well, wonderful. We're always happy to make ourselves more familiar and for people to know we don't sell wine or auto parts, but they're still okay with us. So it's always good. Sharon, back over to you. So we've talked a little bit about how you worked with Funkhouser and Associates and working on the South Bend community engagement and strategic planning. And I'd just love to know more about, what the results have been and where you're taking this moving forward.
Well, I think looking at some of the recommendations that were outlined, it was categorized into the categories of security, prosperity, and dignity. And when you take a few of the examples that they talked about was gun violence. If you look at gun violence as being one of the priorities on the security side for public safety was the priority. And so the security is the reduction of the gun violence. And the next category, talking about the prosperity of what does that look like, and the recommendations is making sure that the police are adequately trained, and not only adequately trained, but making sure that they are reflective of the communities that they serve. So making sure that we understand that when you say that you are there to serve and protect, is that the trust and the relationship building, that the community trusts that, and it should be reflective of what we look like. And the dignity part out of that is to have the police department continue with engagement and outreach with the community as well. A third piece of the recommendation, another priority, was the workforce, like Ms. Rogers had talked about, and talking about pathways to good jobs. And how you get the pathways to good jobs is having access with transportation for them to be able to get back and forth to work, because we know that that's definitely a barrier for them. And then to support also local employers to try to retain employment locally in our communities to increase our tax base as well. And lastly, one of the recommendations was housing. And not only just looking at affordable housing, but mixed use housing that will also increase the tax base. We're in the land of Notre Dame. And sorry if you're not a Notre Dame fan, but we have a lot of diversity in the city, and there's housing that is available, and we need to make sure that we increase that housing stock for everyone, and not only for the high end, but the affordable housing, and making sure that we're preparing people for home ownership as well. So those were some of the recommendations that Funkhouser and Associates sat down and gave to us. Now it's council's task now, under one of the committees that we have is called residential neighborhoods. And we've been going out into the neighborhood and getting community feedback as well. And sometimes you have residents, because of the lack of trust, they don't come to participate. So we still have to, as council representatives, be their voice as well. So we're hearing what our constituents are saying and what they're looking for. So what is our job as council is to make sure that we're taking those results and that we're setting goals, and we're making sure that we have funding in the budget, and then implementing those things, and then making sure that administration is following through, and then holding them accountable to that as well, to make sure that we are increasing the stock for everybody can thrive and have equal quality of life.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you had a lot of very concrete recommendations, and so now you're going through your process in terms of prioritizing and ensuring that you have the funding and so forth to do that. And hopefully the process that you went through also will help with some of that trust building that you've been talking about. That's so critical.
Absolutely.
So there were some questions, and so Sharon, maybe I would ask you. There was a question that came in: to what extent were community inequities, specifically specific, domestic groups and neighborhoods identified? So I know you've talked a little bit about inequities, but do you have more that you'd like to talk about that? And then Stacey, I'll ask you the same thing.
Okay.
Well, I know, for instance, for housing, which is a major problem, I know that we have a lot of infield vacant homes. We have a lot of landlords who live out of state. So we have been dealing with the presence or lack thereof of landlords. We've been dealing with lead in some homes. We've also had an issue with the housing authority. They had a lot of units offline, and we had to vacate some buildings that 130 something seniors lost housing, and several hundred people lost vouchers as well. So we have a new housing director that we're working with now to ensure that we get funding locally and from the federal government to make sure that people who lost their housing and who need it most have an opportunity. And one of the things that the new director with Housing Authority has done, they also have emergency vouchers. So if someone is homeless or a veteran, they can get them fast tracked to get them off the streets and into housing. Another disparity we talked about is, of course, there's differences on different sides of town. My specific district is diverse. You can come on one side of the town and it's flourishing, and right across the river, it looks deplorable. So making sure that there's curbs and sidewalks and just beautifications in neighborhoods would just make people feel better, and to keep up with their properties, and making sure that we're getting debris and doing neighborhood cleanups and tires out of the alleys. So there's just differences in different demographics throughout the city that we have to make sure that we are being intentional, and we are listening to people who have been complaining for years that things haven't been done in my neighborhood. Why is all of this happening in certain neighborhoods and not in ours? So what the city has taken a robust approach that we have doubled and tripled our miles of lanes to pave streets. We have increased lighting throughout the entire city and replaced all of our lighting with LED lights to take away some of the blind spots to try to minimize crime. So we have been intentional of trying to make sure that we focus on people who are less fortunate, and consider some things could be considered low-hanging fruit that we need to make sure that we are attacking, but it also is enhancing the quality of life of everybody.
Good. So it sounds like you didn't just analyze, the inequities, but to the point of another question here, that you really did weigh alternatives in terms of like, okay, well, how do we actually reduce these inequities? So we've identified them. Now, what are some concrete steps we can take to reduce those? Stacey, I'd love to get your perspective on that in terms of community inequities in Baltimore County.
Thank you, Joe. And I would concur with Sharon from the standpoint of having to be strategic about that equity lens. So what I'd like to focus on for the minute or so in this perspective, we have a goal, our goal 3 in our strategic plan. This was in our initial plan. We played this out in a number of ways within the organization that, requires us to have an equity lens on all of the decisions that we're making about resources, where we are infusing resources, for what reason. I have really 2 great examples, but that goal says we have to build a operating environment within the government where equitable decisions are made, providing opportunities and allocating resources and services through an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens that enhances growth and prosperity for all residents. So, example, we had a tree planting program that's a part of our mandated canopy maintenance. For that program, we applied the equity lens. And what we did, we looked at that program based on communities where certain social economic conditions exist, certain health conditions, asthma, all types of issues that you would have never applied to a tree planting program, because the overall objective is to get these 20,000 trees planted. But when we added that lens, it truly changed the dynamics of the program in terms of where the trees were going to be planted, the communities, the engagement, the education piece. It was incredible, based on what the original operating function of that program was when we started the strategic plan and the equity lens, and where they are now is like night and day. But it's ensuring that all communities have access to trees that we know help the overall environment. The other one was in recreation and park services. We had to take a look at the inequities in terms of our park stock, playgrounds, tennis court, courts, basketball courts, etc., across the county, to ensure that we are paying attention to all communities. But what were the communities that were in the most dire need? And you'd be surprised how it shifted where the resources went. So this is why I say that our strategic plan is a living, breathing kind of document that guides us, because we have applied this goal 3 to everything that we do. When we're in the budget process, our equity and diversity chief sits in on the budget deliberations, as does our chief of sustainability, hearing, the proposals from departments and asking questions. Well, from an equity and diversity lens, have you thought about this in your proposed project? And it just is changing the way we do business in the government. And that's because we have a definitive goal that says this is how we will operate. And so from a disparity standpoint, all that we learned during the pandemic about inequities in access to healthcare, distribution of the vaccines, the need for far more bilingual staff to be able to help us deliver services based on the changing demographics of our county. This is how a strategic plan can help you operate differently with a different mindset once everyone embraces and understands what your goals mean. And I really love the equitable decision-making goal, because we definitely, hold ourselves accountable for that goal.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, it really shows how, one, the importance of strategic planning, but two, that equity lens, how critical that is to everything that you're doing now, and how, even on things that people don't always think about as an equity issue, it really is.
Absolutely.
So it's fundamental. So there was a question for both speakers. And so Sharon, I would like to ask this of you first is, what did you learn during the process that might change the way your locality approaches engagement, data collection, policy goals? Are there things that jump out at you as like, these were things we really learned and are going to change the way we do some of these things?
I think what Stacey had said, if I can piggyback a little bit, is that you do have to look at it from a different lens. We sometimes live in a bubble, and a lot of times we work in silos. So making sure that we are listening to the residents and not just hearing them, but actually taking where they live and their realities as far as when they're experiencing gun violence. They're scared. You have people that are sleeping in their bathtubs, or kids and people afraid to come out of their houses. So we really have to be realistic. We have to have hard conversations, and with the police department, And we have to have hard conversations with the community to let them know that, you know, a lot of times people think that the council can stop a bullet. You know, the police can stop a bullet. We all have to work together. And, you know, there's a lot of lessons that we got to get. Well, what are the kids doing? Why are they carrying guns? We got to get to the root cause of some of the problems and tackle it. What is happening in the homes? How can we support them as well? And the youth have to be involved in those conversations. I think a lot of times we were telling them what they need. And we started during the end of this planning process is bringing them to the table and start asking them, what do you need? And why are you so angry? So there's a lot of, especially with the pandemic, with people being closed in, mental health is on the rise in our youth. The suicide is up in our youth. So we have now been intentional when making sure that we, one of the things is investing in the mental health crisis center. We have the suicide and mental health services going on and increasing in Indiana. So we're excited that we're taking small steps, but I also think that one of the things that we've learned also is that we have to be transparent. People don't trust the government. They don't trust the police. They don't trust what we're saying. So we have to really invest and put our money where our mouth is, no pun intended, but to make sure that we're prioritizing and making sure that they have lighting and adequate grocery stores and restaurants and places that they can thrive and live in, not living in substandard housing. So I think what we learned most is that every year we have people complaining and we just go through the motion. This was an opportunity for, you know, Funkhouser and Associates to come in as an independent organization and saying, hey, this is what the community is asking for. It's doable. If you plan and do these things, you can attain them all. But I think that as now council, we have to work with administration, with the community, and keep them engaged throughout the entire process and making sure that they are seeing tangible results and not just us doing it for political reasons, but because it's the right thing to do.
Yeah, that is so important. Stacy, what other thoughts do you have in terms of kind of the lessons learned and how the process will inform future processes?
Well, one of the big lessons for us is around measuring how you measure for the resources invested in the agreed upon action. How do you truly document and measure the outcome? Lots of staff are used to measuring outputs. Like we served 200 people doing X, but really definitively defining what is it that we need to measure? What change was it? What percentage increase, percentage decrease of something? What is it that we're looking for to say that this worked? And the reason why we feel that that's so important and the part of the work we are now working on going forward is because we believe it's important to say up front what it is that we're seeking to achieve. Most staff do not have that level of expertise because they have not had training in outcome measurements and really looking at your work from the standpoint of what's going to be different. You know, it's a mindset change, and we believe that we do need more training and expertise in that field. We have a great data stat team, but sometimes they even struggle when we're having the discussions because we want to come up with those key metrics that we can hold ourselves accountable, particularly against our budget. If you look in our budget message is online, and you'll see things that we say tangibly, we're going to do this. for that money, for what we've invested, and this is our accountability back to our council, which we have a wonderful working relationship. They bought into and were with us in developing the strategic planning. But we have to do more work in perfecting the who or what is better off part. And this goes back to the community engagement. We have an open checkbook on our website, the county website, that shows where all of our monies go that we're investing in. But I feel like the next step to that is showing the data in a way so that people see the needle moving.
Mm-hmm.
You know, not just on from the standpoint of widgets, but what's different, what quality of life things are different for our communities. And that's where we feel that our colleagues from the Academy can help us, you know, increase our skills and capacities there, which will help us to be successful in telling our story.
Yeah, it's difficult for people to transition a lot of times from outputs to outcomes. And a lot of it is you're not in direct control. So it's like, you know, you've got to think about like, well, what's the logic? We do this, and then that leads to X, and ultimately gets you to the outcome. So yeah, it is a difficult process, but yeah, we're enjoying working with you on that. There were a couple of questions around kind of more of the process, like how many people are too many to effectively do community strategic planning, advice on getting the right group, and advice on getting the process down right in terms of what methods are being used. So I'd love to get your sense, maybe Stacey, I'll look to you. What is your sense of, based on what we did, what's the right number? What's the right way to do that? I'm happy to offer that perspective too, but would love to hear from you and Sharon.
Sure. Well, our update was more geared toward the internal stakeholders, but how we use aspects of the strategic plan. We developed, for example, on our attainable housing side of it, what we do is take certain aspects of the work and convene blue ribbon commissions or work groups to help guide that work. Then we have community input and roundtables and discussions. So it varies. Our process is to identify the area that we want to work on. And in most instances, our county executive likes to engage a panel of experts and then take those conversations to the broader community. So it could be a panel of experts working on a topic to help us of say 10 individuals that review and analyze, you know, the topical area that we're working on. And the two that I've had the pleasure of being the internal lead was solid waste management. And what are we going to do about our trash system? You know, our solid waste management and the trash, because we do have a challenge with what's going to happen in the future in terms of landfill, et cetera, because it's clear trash is going to continue. That's a certainty. But then what we did, we held a public town hall about, you know, here are some of the key strategies we're thinking about. And we typically would get maybe 100 people to join us for the discussions. This was during the pandemic and they were virtual. But we do the same thing each year with the budget engagement. And we've had anywhere from 100 to 200 people come out, hear our thoughts, and give us feedback. So it depends on the process that you're using will determine how many. But if you're using here's a topical area you want to work on, convening a expert work group and, you know, having members of the community involved, which we do on every single one, and then feeding that back to the larger community, you can have a community discussion of anywhere from 50 to 100 people. And you still come out of it with input. And the use of technology now, like we're doing on the polling questions, has enhanced that experience too.
Great. Yeah, absolutely. Sharon, what is your sense in terms of the process? And there was also a question here around kind of metrics and behavioral metrics in particular. So if you have any thoughts on those, I'd love to hear them.
I think, well, one of the methods to get the community buy-in, again, we had council in each district, since we know our districts better than, you know, anyone. We have various neighborhood associations within the districts. So all of the neighborhood associations were contacted. Several of them hosted meetings, and we just had a planning process to identify what our strengths were, opportunities are, and what are our visions for the next 20 years, and what South Bend looks like. And for the ones who did not have neighborhood associations, they reached out to faith-based organizations and various other organizations to make sure that we were tapping each inch and area of the city to give them an opportunity to speak. So I think that in itself increased the buy-in and the community engagement. There were also separate workshops and sessions in the departments with the department heads to talk about prioritizing and what does the strategic planning process look like. So I think what happened is that, and the police chief and departments were met with. So I think it bridged the gap between the administration, the government, and the community, that we were all in the same room with one another, working on these goals and opportunities together and talking together. And then at the end of the session, reports were sent to the council and to administration to give us feedback of what the responses look like. So in between the final recommendations, we were always kept abreast of each individual's feedback from each organization. So I think that that's what helped with the buy-in and the community input.
Great. And there was another question, Sharon, and I know you've talked a lot about the process the council is going through, but do you have examples of kind of specific short-term program responses in response to the strategic plan? Are there things that you're implementing kind of immediately as you're moving forward?
Absolutely. Just recently, we built a United Way Center, neighborhood clinic, and a community center for neighborhood people to be able to come and utilize the services. And inside that facility, there is mental health services, a WIC program, a pharmacy right there in the neighborhood, and tutoring classes, early childhood development and Head Start. So we have identified some of those needs and are making sure that we're addressing them. And also we're currently working on, specifically in my district, affordable housing. And we have been doing that strategically and consistently, and making sure that our residents and are being able to turn into homeowners, and making sure that we are having equitable housing stock available. So there are a lot of things that we have or have been working with that are in line with the strategic plan, and we'll continue to do that. We actually, one of the most recent things we have, the police department has a real-time crime center. And so we're having community buy-in that a lot of our residents have registered their Ring doorbell systems with the police department. So when you're talking about curbing gun violence, we have had town halls now, and making sure that we have a youth council. So they are giving input as to some of the barriers that they're facing. And we have definitely increased funding for mental health and for our homelessness population as well. So those are some of the new things that we are tackling one step at a time.
Great. So short-term and long-term, very important. Stacy, any final thoughts that you have?
I believe that strategic planning is a critical part of an effective government operation, because there are so many services and things that a government enterprise has to deliver. But when you have a strategic plan that ties critical efforts together so that you can work across departments, that you all are focusing in on a specific need, for example, for our affordable and attainable housing effort. It's not just the housing department, it's everybody. It's the Office of Law, Real Estate Compliance. It's everybody working together toward that goal of increasing the housing stock across the county. You know, it has to be the legislative team, 100% of the enterprise focusing in on what is the desired outcome and what is my piece, what is my contribution to getting there. Strategic planning really does assist you in aligning your resources and your efforts.
Great. Well, I love also, I mean, you've done strategic planning and you've made it a living document. And I think that is so,
Yes.
so critical. Sharon, any final thoughts that you wanted to share with our audience today?
Well, you know, I think this process really have bridged the gap between community council with local government and also administration. So you're talking about more dialogue, more conversations, and increasing, making sure that IT department has resources available, and trying to just now see what can we do better and how can we begin the implementation process, and making sure that while we're implementing, we're continuing to have transparency that the community is expecting and that they want to see, and making sure that we are that they're holding us accountable, and we in turn are holding administration accountable, and we're making sure that we are trying to touch every barrier and every need of our community to make sure that everyone is thriving, making sure that everyone is heard. And I just think this process was, again, like none other. It opened our eyes, and I cannot thank Funkhouser and Associates enough for how they came and were very deliberate and how they were welcoming and how they were patient. And no matter how many meetings that we scheduled, they came and they were available and provided factual and blunt information for us to realistically look at through the lens of our residents' eyes of what they're saying that they need, and making sure that we are going to address those needs and their concerns.
Well, wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Stacey and Sharon. I cannot thank you enough for being here. I've learned so much. I could talk to you all for more hours, but I know we are winding down, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you. Thanks to our audience. And Mark, I'll turn it over to you. You're a former mayor. Would love to get your take on what you've heard and our next steps as we move forward.
Well, the main thing that I heard is that governing is hard. And, you know, being able to help communities like Baltimore County and South Bend do the hard work of bridging the gap between government and its constituents was extremely rewarding for us. We really appreciated the opportunity and the support that we got from Sharon and her colleagues on the city council and the administration. We talked to hundreds of residents. We talked to department heads. We did dozens of meetings, and the result was good. We were trying to answer three questions. What do you want to do? How can you do it effectively? How can you pay for it sustainably? And I think we were able to get that done in a way that allows the community to be activated to implement the plan. So look forward to the partnership with the Academy to allow us to do more and better work like that across the country.
Wonderful. Terry?
Well, I want to start by thanking Sharon and Stacey for sharing your stories with us today, and the power that was so evident in your stories and in your communities about how strategic planning facilitated by Funkhouser and Associates or by the Academy helped you solve the problems of your constituents. And so I just really appreciate you sharing in all of its transparency, the process and the joys and the trials of going through that. Mark, we are looking forward to working with you and Funkhouser and Associates. And for those of you in our audience, if you'd like to engage with us for assistance in your communities, you can find us at the napawash.org website. There's a connect button. We'd love to get your questions and we'd love to engage with you. So I hope that everybody found this conversation useful and informative, and we look forward to having more of these conversations with communities across the country. Again, Stacy and Sharon, thank you so much for joining us today.